Go live right now. Here we go. All right. Welcome, everybody. We're live as we let everyone join here. We'll kick it off with an introduction of myself and our SAVI team. You're getting three for the price of one. And I don't know what it says about us that the price was free, but you're getting three for one. As my dad always used to say, if it's free, I'll take three. And so you guys are getting all three of us. Let's just share maybe who we are, why we're excited to be here, and maybe a celebration of impact over the past month. So for many of you, you already know me. I'm Tyler Costin, founder of SAVI Coaching, and I'm excited to be here to share some of the things that I've learned over the past month establishing standards. And my celebration is actually I'll celebrate Claire. Claire, celebrate you for running that youth camp, the SAVI youth camp, up in Idaho a few weeks ago, and I've been getting a couple of emails just of how excited parents were. So that's my celebration. Claire, and I'll throw it over to you.
Thanks. Hey, everybody. I am Claire Murphy. I'm the Director of Operations at SAVI and get to travel the country, travel the world with Tyler and help our community online as well. I'm excited to be here, and this is kind of a celebration as well of what we've been doing. And Tyler doubling down on this is just the fact that standards and principles have been what we have seen impact the community the most over the past month, and helping coaches realize and be excited about the fact that, cool, we have great systems and they can teach basketball better and love that, but that it's doubling down on a standard and a principle and some of the intangibles that has made their programs make the jump. So it's been really fun to see that, and I'm excited to see more of it.
Awesome. All right, I guess it's up to me. Hi, everyone. I'm Chris. I've recently started working with Savvy and working with commit members, but I think more so working with two people I like to celebrate, Claire and Tyler, and helping map out like a general whole program. What would that look like, and how do we help coaches make sure they can see their blind spots, maybe? And I agree with what Tyler and Claire are both saying about standards. The other thing I would just add to it is standards come from your identity and your purpose and your why. So that's a lot of the work that we've been doing with the commit members and those coaches who just need a little bit of support in different directions. So really excited to continue that work with like-minded coaches and people working hard to be better for the people they serve.
Awesome. So let's dive in. Any challenge, obstacle, any pain point that you are experiencing in your program as a leader, as a coach, whether it be on the court, off the court, with your players, with your staff, with your parents, I believe that every pain point can be addressed through improving your standards. And that's why I think this is such a powerful and important topic. And before we really can dive into this topic, I just would urge, I see many of you are in the chat right now, sharing your name and where you're dialing in from. Please continue to do that as we have many people joining live, but even many more that we jump on recorded. And let me kick this off with a story, and then we'll dive into the presentation and get some great insight from Chris and from Claire as well and their wealth of knowledge. I just got back from a week traveling and working with programs. I worked at the program in Iowa and I worked at the program in Illinois. And both coaches, guys and girls coaches of both schools, were sharing that their biggest obstacle at their teams, these are successful teams, winning teams that have gone to the state tournament, have won state championships, is their lack of leaders. Like, man, we don't have leaders on our team this year. We don't have great communicators. And and I kept speaking with the coaches about this and then teaching, training, and attempting to establish a standard of leadership and communication, hands on. And it was really hard. It was very energy draining for me as the coach to have to spend so much of my time coaxing communication and coaxing care and leadership out of the players. And it reminds me of something that my good friend Mike Neighbors has said many times. And he tells this to his teams. He says, I can coach you or I can motivate you, but I can't do both. You pick. And the reason I share this with you is if you have not yet established a standard around things like things that upset you, things that frustrate you, whether it be a lack of communication, whether it be a lack of energy, whether it be parents and how they act in the stands, or parents and how they speak to you. If you haven't established standards around any of these things, the etiquette of your coaches, how your players come into the gym, any frustration you feel can be traced back to a lack of establishing a standard. And by the end of this 45, 50 minutes, you will no longer have an excuse to be frustrated year after year at parents, players, staff, administrators, whatever. And my true and sincere hope is that after this free webinar, you'll not only have an idea of how to fix it, but that you'll be inspired to spend a month with us, either in our standards cohort, or you go to some deep one-on-one commit coaching, so we can help you establish standards for whatever it is that upsets you. Shoot, if here's one I hear. Actually, we'll go Claire then Chris after me. What's the biggest complaint or pain point you hear from coaches when you talk to them? I'll go first. Youth coaches. Gosh, kids, they just don't have basketball IQ. They don't understand the game. That's a lack of standards. That's a lack of standards. Why complain about a lack of something in others when you can't fix others? You can't change others. You can only change yourself. And that's what we believe at Savvy Coaching is we believe that change starts with us. We believe that we can have an impact, and that's what we're here to do. We're here to help you change standards. Claire, what's one that you've heard a lot from coaches?
Classic communication, whether it's what they're saying or how often they're saying it or how loud they're saying it. There's a lot of pieces that go into it, but yeah, expecting people to communicate without teaching them how.
It's good. It's good. Chris.
I think one thing I hear a lot of is, especially with leadership, is do more, be better, not this is how you do it, right? Like that communication piece, not unlike what Claire and you were talking about, is just, how do we teach the kids how to communicate and give them steps and processes? And even the adults, I know since COVID has started, there's been like we're retraining the parents. The parents don't understand how sport works anymore because they have been out of it with their kids. So it's been a bit of a struggle with both those areas.
Mm-hmm. That's good. And so I'm going to take you through a brief presentation, but to end the story, by the end of both of our sessions, these programs were showing up very differently in 2 days and in 3 days. In fact, one of the coaches sent me a text message that he got from one of his seniors after a session was done that was essentially recognition that he hadn't been showing up as a leader, a commitment that he was going to be the best leader he's ever been, and that he would no longer remain comfortable with his level of communication, responsibility, and ownership. And he ended up with, "Thanks so much for investing in us. I love you, coach." This was not to me, this was to his coach. And the coach said it brought tears to his eyes. He's been working on this player for years. He's a senior now. And that was the aha moment, and that was the breakthrough. And so before we dive into this, I just want to give everyone a bit of encouragement. It's possible. You can do it. You can have breakthrough in these areas that have been year after year after year just a thorn in your side and the thing that steals your joy from coaching. You can have breakthrough, but it's not going to be easy, and we're here to help you have breakthrough in whether it be ball handling, communication, parent relations, timeliness, professionalism, anything. So let's dive in. We're going to go 3, 2, 1, and we're going to start with the 3 things that are holding you back from having effective breakthrough. And let's define some terms. A term that is commonly thrown around in sport is culture. And I don't dislike conversations about culture, but the waters have become quite muddied. And as always at Savvy, you know that we name things different and unique terms and language so it can be unique to our definition of these things. And so we aren't going to throw around culture as everyone else throws around culture. Instead, we're going to talk about standards. And one of my favorite poets has a quote, and the poet says this. He says, "It's not the job of the gardener to force growth. It's the job of the gardener to create the ideal conditions for growth." And I would urge each and every one of you to think about standards as the conditions of your garden, the environment that you're creating around your team and in your program, right? It's the how much water, it's the soil, it's the stakes in the ground for the vines to be supported with. Those are your standards. Your culture, I would urge you to think of as what grows, how it grows, what the fruit is, how it tastes, right? And you can't control all of those things. And every year there's different factors. You have different players, you have different personalities, you've got a different mix of the soil. Like you can't control your culture. The culture is a result of the people that are stakeholders in your team. And so stop trying to control it. In fact, you need to co-create, you need to grow with them. But what you can do is you can establish and hold standards. And we want to help you do that. We want you to take what, if you look at this picture, take what is fuzzy and unclear and frustrating often and clarify it. And I'll share with you what I think was the breakthrough moment for this player on this team that I just worked with. And I think that it's the first place that you need to go as a coach for you to establish standards. Remember, you establish standards as a leader, and then you share and co-create what the culture is going to look like and how those standards get upheld with your players, your assistants, the parents, anyone that's the administration, anyone that's a stakeholder. So we had our breakthrough on day 2 of 3, and the player's name was Carter, senior, tough nosed player. And I asked him in one of our classroom sessions, I said, Carter, who are you, man? And he's like, what do you mean? I'm Carter. And I'm like, who are you? Like, I don't know who you are. I've been working with you for a day and a half, and I don't know who you are yet. And I'm like, it's inconsistent. From moment to moment, you're a different person. Like, who are you? He said, I don't know. I don't know how to answer that. And I said, well, that makes sense. Because you haven't clarified where you're going. I said, Carter, where are you going? Where are you going as an individual? Like, where are you going in your athletic career? Where are you going? What are your aspirations? Where are you going? He said, I don't know where I'm going. I said, until you know where you're going, there's no way that I can know who you are. Because once we're on a path together, that's when we really learn each other. I need to know where you're going so I know how to coach you. And what we were really unpacking was we were starting to unpack his why. And this is one of the things that Chris helped me unpack, Claire and I help coaches unpack, and I help coaches do is this is the SAVI coaching tree. Now, we've all heard of a coaching tree before, but you have to understand that every single one of your standards starts with the tree. And if you don't have deep roots, if you don't know your why, if you don't know where you're going, there is no way that you're going to know what your standards are supposed to be. A lot of people are like, I want a great culture. Okay, you want a great culture. The culture is this fruit. The culture is the outcomes. You want this great culture. That's what grows up. But you can't have a great culture by focusing on culture. You have a great culture by establishing standards, and standards grow out of deep roots. You got to know where you're going. You got to have a vision, and that's what the roots are. Now, the trunk, that's going to be your standards, right? This is going to be the strength on which everything else relies. And if you have bad fruit, bad culture, bad outcomes, frustrations, it's only because your roots aren't deep and your trunk's not strong. And and most players focus on outcomes, right? Most players, they want a championship, they want to be a starter, they want to score 20 points a game, whatever. They're focusing on the outcomes, but they don't have strong roots. They don't know where they're going, and if they don't have good standards about how they do what they do, they've got no chance. The fruit's going to break. The first time a storm comes, it's going to sweep that thing away. And then out of your trunk, once you know the direction and the structure, then you get your branches. And your branches are the systems. That's one thing we specialize in at SAVI, is helping you establish systems. But any of the commit members that we're personally in one-on-one coaching, we take them through this. Because until you have this clarity, there's no chance you're going to get the fruit that you want. That's the tree. That's the 4-step process. And that's what we're going to attempt to take you through today. Okay, many of you are, and Claire, I know you're monitoring the chat as well. And I'll share a story and then ask this question, because you will never have a transformational program until you can answer this question. What are you willing to lose for? Your standards are only that which you care more about than winning. And I share this ancient proverb. There was a young warrior that wanted to learn from a master, a martial arts master who lived up in the mountains. So he trekked through the mountains and slept outside of the master's dojo or the master's home. And the next morning, the master came out and said, "Who are you?" And the warrior said, "I want to learn from you. I want to train with you." And the master says, "No, I don't believe you." And he went back inside. And the young warrior slept over the night, waited till the next morning, asked again, "Master, I want to train with you." And the master said, "No, no, no, I don't believe you yet," and didn't let him in. This happened for over a period of a week. After a week passed, the master came out the last morning, and the young warrior was there, and the young warrior had severed his own arm and said, "I will give up, I will lose, I will give up my arm in order to train with you." And the master said, "You are now ready," and brought him in. Now, the reason I think that's such a vivid picture is we all want the fruit. We want to have good culture, but we aren't willing to actually lose for our standards. And until you're willing to lose your standards, lose a good player, lose the comfort of a relationship with a parent, lose a number of games, lose possibly some respect or friendship over it, or lose like the comfort of a harmonious relationship with your staff. Unless you're willing to lose something for your standards, you won't see change. You won't see change. And so when you're evaluating, okay, what are my standards? What are my standards around whatever change that you want to see? What are my standards around parent relationships? What are my standards around player commitment? What are my standards around level of communication on our team? Until you're willing to lose something to gain those things, you will never see change. And so that's the first question I ask coaches, like, okay, do you care enough about this to actually lose something for it? And if the answer is no, then don't complain about the results. Let me throw it over to Claire and Chris here real quick. Have you had a moment in your playing or coaching career where you had to lose something in order to uphold a standard or a commitment that you believed in?
Definitely.
Yeah.
I think coaching for me, we've had even at the University of Ottawa, star players who, their standard or maybe their academics were not the highest, and they had to sit, and it's tough. You hope that that week isn't against your toughest opponent. But knowing that years in the future, it's the rookies who are watching that, who are going to be there, and that's setting the standard for them. But tough calls, like on a weekly basis, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Chris.
Yeah. When you're coaching 12 kids, they all have parents, and the parents are all concerned for their kids' growth. But I'm
Mhm.
concerned for everybody's growth. So I'm obviously going to have conflict with a lot of the parents a lot of the time,
Mhm.
whether it's face to face. But sometimes these things do blow up, and you have to kind of eat your ego a little bit when things happen publicly, and handle yourself in a way that, like, you can't fire back. You have to be in control. You almost have to walk away from scenarios sometimes that maybe make you look weak, but you come back and you handle them privately. It's like we don't punish publicly. You know what I mean? With kids or parents, like, it's just step away from it, take your breath, to give them time, and come back. But you have to take an ego hit and maybe a social hit in order to execute that.
Yeah. Great standards require great sacrifice. And here's a saying, and the unwillingness to make that sacrifice is what often holds coaches back. Okay, I'll give you this story real quick. You're familiar, if you're a basketball person. Again, I love seeing all the questions in the chat box. Great to connect with people that are old friends and new friends. Great to see you. Chris, great to see you. Carr, Steve, hello. Kay Reed, good to see you. Daniel, Paul. All right, great to see you all. This is Wilt Chamberlain. He's holding this up as the only player to ever score 100 points in an NBA game. And this is a really unbelievable story because most people don't even know the facts of the story. So Wilt Chamberlain was historically awful free throw shooter, like many of your teams, historically awful. In fact, you can have a standard around free throw shooting. Let me just go off on this real quick. We talk about free throws with coaches all the time, like, oh, our team's awful at free throw shooting. Then you haven't established a standard around free throw shooting. Don't complain about something you haven't established a standard around. So, like, are you willing to lose for it? Meaning, actually, no, yeah, are you willing to lose for it? So if you're like, oh, I really want to be a better free throw shooting team. Okay, well, do you actually give players playing time and prioritize playing time based on their free throw percentage? Then you actually don't care about it as much as other things. So don't say it. Or you do. Or you haven't established a standard around what you do pre-practice, in practice, what you chart, what shooting competitions you do around free throws. So it's like anything that brings you pain requires a standard. And then you decide, okay, am I willing to improve this standard? Am I willing to actually lose time for other things on this standard? If not, don't complain about it. So here's an example. Wilt Chamberlain, historically terrible free throw shooter, under 50%, well under 50%. In fact, teams would have just a bunch of thugs foul him and keep him on the roster just so that would have a chance of winning. So one of his early career teammates, Rick Barry, took pity on him, and as a 93% free throw shooter himself, who shot free throws underhand, Rick Barry taught Wilt Chamberlain in secret how to shoot free throws underhand. And the first NBA game that Wilt Chamberlain rolled out his newfound skill was this 100-point game. He went 28 for 32 from the free throw line, scored more points than any other human being in an NBA game. And the very next game scored 72 points, also shooting over 85% from the free throw line, also shooting underhand. And then never shot underhand again the rest of his career. Went back to shooting regular overhand, sub 50%, and became guardable instead of unstoppable for the rest of his career. And when he was asked why, and he wrote this in his memoirs, he said, because I didn't want to be made fun of, and I didn't want to look like a weakling or like a sissy, is what he said. And that goes to our second reason why most coaches are unwilling to establish and uphold standards or unable to. It's because they're not willing to sacrifice approval. So Wilt Chamberlain wouldn't shoot underhand because he cared more about the approval of his peers than he did about being the best that he could possibly be. And there's going to be a constant pressure in this. Like a lot of young coaches, they care more about the approval of their players, them seeing them as a friend, than they do about establishing excellent standards. Oftentimes, we as coaches, we care more about the approval of other coaches or the approval even of the parents in the program as opposed to establishing standards that are going to serve the entire team. And so the next question for you is you're really wondering like, okay, how do we establish great standards? Is, are you willing to sacrifice approval? And it's really, are you willing to sacrifice what feels good now, approval, for what you actually want, your greater desires, right? That you might experience later after these special standards are established. And let me give to the third reason, the third disqualifier. It's a third question. These are the three things that will disqualify your team or your program or you as a leader from having championship level standards. And the question is this: will you hold the line? Like, will you actually hold the line? That line, we all know what the line is. Think about the last time you were in the gym with your team. Was there hustle above or below the line? I don't need to define the line for you because you know the line. The line is the standard that you in your heart know you'd be proud of for your program. You know what it is. What's above or below the line? And the majority of moments in the majority of teams, in the majority of sports, are below the line. They're just below the line. And are you willing to do the exhausting, tiresome, and consistent work to hold the line? That the moment any action dips below your agreed upon, predetermined standards, are you willing to stop everything? Willing to lose over it because you're not going to be able to get in your press break. Willing to deal with the disapproval because, here goes coach, talking to us about communication again, requiring communication again, right? And are you willing to give the energy it's required to hold the line every single day? I've had the opportunity, and then I'll throw it to Claire and Chris to share any of their experiences with this around great leaders or great coaches. I've had the opportunity to be around unbelievable leaders in the sports space and in the business space. And every single unbelievable leader that I've been around made me feel consistently uncomfortable. Consistently uncomfortable. Like, oh man, I don't know if my level of attention to detail, my level of owner's eyes, my level of whatever, I don't know if it's up to par. What more can I be doing? Great leaders have a way of holding the line just with their presence. And that is what's required for establishing standards. And will throw it. Let me throw it with a question, Claire or Chris. Have you ever had an example where you either have had the line held for you in the moment or have held it for another person that you would like to share?
Yeah, I can go ahead with that. I think, you know, sometimes that conflict, that butting of heads and misunderstanding of each other requires a bit of communication. And sometimes what that ends up being, if we handle it correctly, is establishing the line and holding each other accountable. So I think anytime I have a conflict with a group of kids when we're in practice, or a kid who's upset with whatever it may be, or a parent, that's an opportunity for us to establish the standard or reestablish it, and set expectations for each other. So I think anytime I have a conflict, for example, in practice, a lot of it comes down to questioning, like stopping things and asking a lot of questions, like why is this not working? What, like making sure we understand each other, where the standard lies. One thing I love, especially within practice, is just say, okay, now go show me what that looks like perfectly for 2 minutes, you know, so that we can reestablish what this should look like, what this should sound like, what this should feel like, and then say, there it is. Now I'm going to hold you accountable to it. Right. I think it's that clarity piece.
Absolutely. Anything to add, Claire?
Yeah, I'll give a quick specific to add on that. Again, University of Ottawa. This is the year that we got bronze at nationals. So these are some of the most talented women basketball players in Canada, and we had a lot of 6 a.m. practices that year, which are tough. And so every morning it was always the same drill that we started with, and this was a full court layup drill. There was nothing special about it, no skill required, but all it was the line. Like, we found our benchmark at the beginning of the year, continued to raise it throughout the year, and all they had to do was hustle as hard as they could and be very precise in their communication and passing to make it happen. So it's like it was very clear at 6 a.m. whether they were not holding the line, and they knew what they had to do to get there.
Yeah. I love what you said there. We're about to get into it. Um, Early in the year, you established the standard, you established the baseline. And coaches, that's where most of you can really improve. Most of all of us can really improve. I'm going through this right now with this little academy that we've launched here in Phoenix. Is we still haven't established our standards well enough yet, and that's on me. I'll give you three great examples. Three, I think they're great examples. One of my early mentors was a gentleman by the name of Danny Beard. Danny Beard played at Kansas, and he was one of the leaders and directors of a camp called NBC Camps. It's Northwest Basketball Camps. And when I first got into coaching, I was still a college player, and I worked for Danny Beard at his NBC camps in this role called a master teacher. And Danny Beard came into my gym. I was a 19-year-old college player running a gym of like 60, 70 high school players. And he walked into my gym, and I sent them to a water break. He said, "Tyler, your gym's not popping." I'm like, "What do you mean? Like, I just taught them some great stuff. Didn't you see me out there demonstrating and dunking and stuff? Like, I just taught them great stuff. None of these players can do the stuff I just taught them. They need this." He's like, "It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how good your teaching is. It doesn't matter how good your demonstrating is. Your gym's not popping. There's no noise. I'm not seeing smiles on faces. I'm not seeing activity. I'm not seeing effort from the players. It's boring. They're sitting. Your gym's not popping." He said, "Tyler, you need to get your gym popping or else you can't be a master teacher for me." And that stuck with me to this day. And he called it the 2 minute rule. He said, "Tyler, my unique gift is I can walk into any gym and within 2 minutes I'll know if the gym's popping or not. And it doesn't even matter what you're doing. It matters how players are doing it. Is the gym popping? Is the gym popping?" Fast forward 5 years later, and maybe six, no, it's a little more. It's probably 6 or 7 years later. And another one of my mentors, Dina Evans, who ran Point Guard College for many, many years and taught me how to really teach at a deep level. She said, "Tyler, I'm seeing a lot of entertainment out of you, but you're not getting people to think deeply about who they're becoming. She's like, you don't have depth to your teaching yet. Man, it took me aback. She said, until you get people to pause and really question if it's worth it, if the level of sacrifice that you're asking of them is really worth it, she's like, then you haven't raised the standard for anybody yet. And that stuck with me to this day. Fast forward another 3, 4 years, and another one of my mentors, Mono Watsa, who had then taken over leadership of PGC basketball, he challenged me again. He said, Tyler, he's like, you're bigger on the outside right now than you are on the inside. Like everything you do out publicly and on the outside is very inspirational and charismatic. He said, but there's something missing. There's a disconnect. And I think it's the credibility that you haven't actually done the hard work on yourself internally. You're not convicted enough internally about the message you're speaking externally for people to be convinced by you. You're not convicted enough for people to be convinced by you. And so that raised the standard for me again. The most memorable moments in my teaching, coaching career were when people that were mentors of mine challenged me to raise my standards. And that's your job as coaches. And I would ask you, if I walked into your gym, what would I see? Is your gym popping? Because I'd know in less than 2 minutes. Because I've made it my specialty over the past 16 years to make sure that our gym is popping. And whenever it's not, everything comes to a screeching halt, because how you do one thing is how you'll do everything. And the one thing that I've chosen to be a standard for any gym or learning environment that I'm a part of is that it's going to be high energy, it's going to be high communication, and there's going to be a lot of hustle. The gym's going to be popping. What's it for you? And it's more than a t-shirt. If we can't see it in 2 minutes, you haven't held the line yet. And what we're going to share with you now is how you can begin to establish standards. And obviously, like 45 minutes on a webinar is not going to get you there. And that's why we walk arm in arm with coaches over a whole month or longer if needed, but a whole month. We're kicking off next month. Our cohort will take however many coaches we have, 30, 40 coaches, through how to establish the standards that they want, that you want, and how to build out the systems to get the measurable outcomes, which Claire is going to talk about here in a moment, that they want. And always know this. If I were to walk into your gym, if Claire were to walk into your gym, if Chris were to walk into your gym, would we know your standards? Obviously. I don't know. Because your standards are how your environment, remember the standards in the environment, how your environment makes people feel when they're in it. That's what we're trying to do, because if you feel a certain way, you're going to act a certain way. Okay, let's dive into some action things. John Wooden said this: it takes time to create excellence. If it can be done quickly, more people will do it. Here's real talk, coaches. I don't know each and every one of you individually, but I know enough and have been around enough to know that most of you on this call are right here. You're right here. You're like everyone else. And that's normal, because it takes a lot of time to be excellent, and excellent is different. And it's uncomfortable. It requires the three things that we talked about. It requires you're willing to lose over this stuff. It requires that you don't care what people are going to think about you, or when you challenge them. And it requires you, like we said, to battle and fight for the line every single day. So this is one of my favorite verses in the Bible. It's from the book of Proverbs. And this is where you start. This is where you start if you're going to establish standards. You start with, where are you going? What is your why? And how are you going to get there? Where there is no vision, the people perish. Where there is no clarity of vision by you, when you're not convicted enough to be able to convince others of the vision, of the standards, your whole program will die. The people, the team will die. So here's where you start. And I'll throw it to you, Chris, on number 3 here about how to share it. One, you must define it. And this is what we're going to take coaches through over the next month, is helping them define their standards. So for us, we've defined it as SAVI. S, simplicity wins. High energy, high communication, and high focus will lead us to win. I was sitting at a coaching clinic with my good friend TJ Rosine. He's a head coach in Georgia. Years ago, we were listening to an NBA. It was a Coaching U clinic. no shade at Coaching You. It was a great clinic. But we're listening to an NBA coach talk about the 17 ways to guard ball screens. And this was a clinic for like a bunch of high school and small college coaches. And he's going through like the 17 ways to guard ball screens that they use in the NBA. And after a way like 7, I was just like, okay, this is the nuance of this is pointless. It's so complex. I leaned over to TJ. I said, TJ, would any one of these 17 ways to guard ball screens help a team more than if they improve their communication and energy? He's like, no, at all levels. If they could just improve communication and energy, it's going to have a greater impact on their defense, guarding ball screens or anything, than these 17 tactics. I'm calling all coaches out. I'm calling myself out here as well. Keep the main thing the main thing. Define your standard. Your standard isn't your playbook. Your standard isn't how you're guarding ball screens. Your standard isn't, your whatever. Your standard is how clearly you can define what you care about, and that is what you have to fight for. So when I ask a coach, okay, what are your standards? If you don't have an answer, like I asked Carter, who are you? If you don't have your answer right there, then you haven't clearly defined it yet. And no one can follow and no one can be inspired by your standards. No one's be convinced that your standards matter until you've clearly defined it. For example, you probably have had some adversity and obstacles with parents in your program. Have you clearly defined and communicated in advance with a meeting and a handout the standards for parent interaction in your program? If not, you haven't clearly defined it. Even at the college level, I've got a Division I college coach that I work with that communicates to the parent of every one of their college players, his women's college, every single year. And he said, here's the standard: 24 hours, open door, bring your evidence. So if any parent of any player on their team wants to talk about playing time, roles, shots, whatever for their daughter, they just have to wait 24 hours after a practice or a game, the one that upset them, and then it's an open door, but you better bring your evidence as to why that player needs more playing time, more opportunity, more shots, more touches, whatever, because he's going to have the evidence on hand. And that's the standard. That's the expectation. And once he's communicated that, he still has the occasional conversations, but he has a lot less if people know that he's going to have evidence and they better bring evidence as well. He's just established a standard. It's been defined. Second, it's about holding the line. You got to fight for it every single day. Do not put something down as a standard in your program if you're unwilling to fight the good fight every single day, right? Strap on the gloves, because it's going to be a fight. It's going to be a fight, and it's never going to end. It's never going to end. Now, once you do number 3, which I'm going to pass over to Chris to talk about, once you do number 3, you're not going to be fighting against people. You're going to be fighting with people. Once you can co-create this thing and pass the torch of fighting, running the race for your culture, that is when things get beautiful, and that's when you stop motivating people and you can start teaching people. Chris, I'll throw it over to you here to talk a little bit more about how to pass the torch effectively.
Yeah, I think Tyler asked me to come up with a question around kind of the idea of standards. And I think in the spirit of passing the torch, I asked, do you as coaches collaborate with players in establishing common team identity through your standards? So I think the wonderful thing about understanding your standards and your why and your purpose is that these are universal truths we're just communicating for ourselves and for the people around us. But every year my team's different. Like the way that they express it, the way that they want to say it, the way that we define it together becomes very unique, and they get to put their flavor on it and enjoy it in their own way, right? So I think it's really important each year to, yes, bring your standards, but also build out a process from which you can allow the kids to make it their own, right? Allow that it to be the teams. So like, for example, what does your standard look like in the context of practice? What are the actions we need to take? You know, we're going from the standard now, rather than going from outcome goal to measurable goal to process goal. We're going from the experience we want to have, the emotional goal, to the process, to what does that tell about us as people, as what is our character? We define that. So there is some processes that I've used in the past. Some work better than others. Some are more fun than others, and it often depends on the group. But I think, making, once we have defined that for ourselves, allowing the group to make it their own is really important.
Really good, Chris. Claire, put a little, I know you're gonna do this, put a little meat on that bone or tofu as you wish, green beans, of like, okay, so I want to measure things, right? I want to know if we're winning. How would you go about doing that?
Yeah, I love measurement. Numbers are great. It really objectifies things in a good way. In a good way, because we do want the feeling, right? You want the feeling of something, but if you only speak to culture in this vague, abstract feeling, will you actually reach it, or do you know if you have it, or if you're maintaining it, or have you defined it, like Chris said? And part of that is measuring it. Part of the fighting for it is working smarter instead of harder. Like, yeah, sometimes you just gotta like let loose, yell at the team. It's great. Like it works sometimes, but to have objective and logical evidence and facts to back it up is really helpful for both yourself and your team and the parents, and just to create some consistency across the board. So coaches are getting more on board with it. Like some of you may have that in place for your systems, whether say lock left, it's we're crossing the ball on the left side 70% of the time, or we're getting 40% of the offensive rebounds, or whatever it is in your systems. Like you have a shooting percentage you're hoping for, you have those, those shooting tests in practice where you have a benchmark, you have a number. And it can be the same for the intangibles. So you set that standard for the system, and you set the standard for the value as well. If it's communication that you value, are you getting 2 reminders before each free throw? That is something an assistant coach, an injured player, you, a parent even, can measure and track down and have evidence behind. Do we get 50 positive touches in pregame? Like, if energy and connection is a value, what are you measuring to see if you're maintaining that, to see if you're holding the line? What is the line? Even if community, like I've had a lot of coaches say, like, community, I want people to show up for our games. Are you showing up for other people? Have you tracked how many other sports or other teams that your players have gone to support? Like, whatever that thing that you define, there is a way to measure it that is not just scientific, but helps enhance the feeling that you want to have.
Yeah, that's really. I just asked for people in the chat, what's a standard that you want to improve this year? One that you recognize, hey, we got to strengthen it. We got to strengthen the standard. We got to build it up. We got to define it. We got to fight for it, and we got to pass the torch on it. And part of passing the torch is measuring, because if you just like yes or no, like as a coach, yes or no, like do are we a great shooting team? Yes or no? Yes or no? You know it. Okay, but you haven't passed the torch on it if you're just the one that's saying we're not a great shooting team. You haven't passed the torch. You haven't given any shared ownership of it. And so, but when you say we're going to define a great shooting team as one that takes 50% of their field goal attempts from outside the 3-point line, and we're going to define it as a team that shoots 38% from the 3-point line as a team. And we're going to define it as a team that invests 30% of all of our practice time in shooting. And we're going to define a great shooting team as a team that celebrates wide open off the catch threes, because those are our golden sevens right there, as Kevin Krieger has named his. And we're going to go crazy when that leaves the hands, regardless of whether or not it goes in. And that is what we're going to measure. Well, okay, now you can say, okay, Claire, you're the captain of celebrating golden sevens from the bench. And Chris, you're the captain of doing the math after every single game if we got 50% of our shots from three or not. And Tyler, you're responsible for making sure that we get our pre-practice shooting routine done. And assistant coach, John, you're in charge of making sure our practice plan has 30% shooting in it. Then you can pass the torch on things. But you can't pass the torch until you create the torch. It's essential. It's essential. Ooh, Daniel, resiliency. That's a really good one. And gosh, I would love to dig in with you on resiliency right now because you say resiliency, and it's like I love resiliency. What is it? Like we all have like a feeling of what it is. It's like, but this needs to be put through the process. Okay, like Daniel, why? And Daniel's my guy, and I know, and these are rhetorical because you're not on. But Daniel, okay, why resiliency? Like, what's your deep rooted why? What's your story? What's your testimony of why resiliency matters to you? Because that will strengthen your conviction. And you need to articulate your why to your team for it to strengthen their conviction. So, why resiliency? Right? And maybe it's a shared story about you and that group of people where you weren't resilient in a moment. Like, why? Okay, now define the trunk of the tree. Define, okay, what is the standard of resilience? How will you know if you're above or below the line? What are these indicators? Okay, what processes are we can put in place from mental training, from like practicing mistake response and failure to learning through loss. Like, what's your systems? Okay, and then what are you going to measure? Like, we can say resiliency, and it's a great start, but we're not nearly all the way there. And that's what Claire, and Chris are going to be taking our Grow members through in the month of July. Is we'll be giving you specific assignments to help you really establish your standards, whether it be in your leadership, your communication, your shooting, your defensive effort, your rebounding, whatever. Like, what's your standard this year? Got another one in the chat box, Car. Communication on the floor. Getting your girls to communicate more often. Oh my gosh, that's such a good standard. And it's going to take us at least a month to dive into that, but I'm very excited to dive into that with you. Okay, let me finish with this, and then Claire and Chris can share your final specific and actionable challenge for our coaches to leave here. And let me share mine first. So where do you start? It's like, oh gosh, this seems like I don't know what my standards are. Start small. There's a parable in the New Testament about a mustard seed, and a mustard seed being one of the smallest of seeds. And yet, from that small mustard seed grows one of the largest bushes or small trees in the entire garden. And the parable is meant to share that you don't start big, you start small. Every big change started small. So if you try to go from zero, like I haven't even held the line on communication, to we are going to have consequences if we're not the best communicating team every single practice, you're going to lose people and wear yourself out. Start small. And these are 5 small ways you can start to establish, okay, what are our standards in these things? Start small, raise the bar. Start small, +1. A lot of times we get inspired and we're like, okay, I'm gonna completely cut out coffee and work out for 2 hours a day. And and then all of a sudden we like, after 2 days, we're like, this sucks. I just ate Chick-fil-A and I suck. And so I'm never doing this again, right? Whereas you're just like, okay, I'm just gonna have a full glass of water when I wake up and get fully hydrated. Then you can stack onto those habits. So here's 5 quick ones. And we'll go through these and offer up ideas and solutions. That's what I love about our Savvy coaching communities. We're always offering up solutions to each other in our community chat. So one, how does your team start? And like, how do you start practices? I've never seen a championship team that doesn't have a standard for what they do when they get in the gym, a checklist. I got to go to a Duke practice 20 minutes before practice. No coaches on the floor. Their players were in a full sweat doing a predetermined shooting and ball handling workout. I go to your practice, and people are coming in late, milling about, and you have to organize them to get started. It's not wrong. It's just you don't care about it, apparently, because you don't have a standard for it. How do you start your practice? Even if it's just doing some stretching, even if it's just everyone touches somebody when they come in with a high five. What is it? Okay, how do you talk? So we all say talk more, but we don't define how and when we talk. So like a very simple, small way to start would be this. Every single time that a coach brings you in, you say a person's name and remind them to hustle. That's how we talk. And it's starting small, right? Like you have to define a very specific system for the standard of how we talk. And then once you do that, then you +1 it. How you move. What's the level of urgency that is required for your team to move? From drill to drill, from hydrate to next thing, from back of the line to front of the line, from offense. What level of urgency is the standard? If you don't define it and you don't hold it, you'll never see it. These are just 5 quick little places to start, okay? And you could wrinkle in resiliency into this, consistency, communication, whatever you care about. How do we fail? How do we fail? Like when we fail in sport, competition is full of failure. You will fail more than you succeed. And if we don't have a standard for how we fail, how we respond, how we act when we fail, how we our teammates to failure, then we're never gonna do something special. Define it, hold it, pass the torch on it. And then how do you end? It's one of the most important and often missed things. Most coaches end practice by emptying their brain. Most coaches do post games just by having a diary. Okay? That is not passing the torch. How you end your practice, how you end your sessions, how you end your games, how you end your time together should be all about passing the torch. And so, how do you end? Like, whatever your standard is, how can you establish a process on how you end things that is different, special, and consistent? Because your culture will grow around the standards that you establish. All right. I'm excited to take all our grow members and our commit members one on one through those 5 and more. And honestly, if at the end of a month you've established standards just around those 5 things, your season will be different. Maybe you want to establish standards around your parents, and we've got some tools for that as well. We'll go Claire and then Chris. What's one specific actionable challenge that you have for our SAVI coaches joining us this evening?
I'll let you
I'll
go first,
say,
Claire.
oh yeah, I'm
You're
excited.
welcome.
Thanks. This I'm gonna use something that'll kind of speak to Daniel's question in the chat. Small, practical way. Carry these things out with small staff or no
Mm,
staff.
mm,
It's picking one thing, and I'm pretty sure this is our friend Kyle Kazuda, that pickleball guy, who mentioned this at one point that the root of priority is the Latin word prioritas, and that literally means first in rank. Like there can only be one first thing. So if you have no support, pick the one thing and then figure out how you're going to fight for it. Is that, the first drill always having that as the objective? Is it a weekly player self eval that they do on that one thing, not everything, but that first in rank thing that is most important to you, that you are most convicted of, so you can convince others? So pick the one thing and figure out how you want to fight for it.
that's a great
Love
answer.
that. Yeah, I think I guess I'm kind of the pass the torch guy a lot in our conversations. I think one thing that I always say to my kids is our voice is better than my voice. I do have to have the plan and the clarity of what things need to look like. I'm the one with the experience. I'm the mentor in this case. But once I know what that is, how do I make what's mine ours? You know what I mean? So like those 5 stages that Tyler laid out are excellent. But how do we then say, okay, we want to start off with energy. What does that look like for this group of kids? Maybe they want to play music. Maybe they want to clap. Maybe they want to play a game. Maybe they want to do, but just to let the reins go a little bit and let them bring their flavor and their voice to it, I think it has a lot of power, and it makes just the experience a lot more enjoyable for when you do have to pull the line and say, you're not doing that thing you said you were going to do. You guys defined it, and I'm just the person that's telling you you're not doing it.
Hmm.
So let's raise the bar.
I love it. That's good.
Yep.
We need a pass the torch guy on the team, just like we need a shooter and a rebounder and a defender. We got it all. Hey, I'm Tyler. On behalf of our SAVI coaching team, we are here to help. We're here to help coaches have a more joy-filled experience in the game, and by extension, players as well. So we would love to have you join us, even if it's just once a month on these free webinars or on social media or checking out the YouTube channel. If you want to go deep, we want to coach you. It's crazy. Coaching is one of the most undercoached professions in the world, and it's so sad. And I know also a lot of it comes from being one of the most under-resourced professions in the world. And so thank you all for doing what you do. You're making a huge difference. Oftentimes unthanked, undercompensated, and you go through hell to do it. So we appreciate you, and that's why we do what we do. We're here to help you. So come join our community, download the app, Savvy Coach, get in there, We'll be diving into establishing standards this month on our weekly cohort calls. Yes, Claire has all the links. You can go to savvycoach.com and check us out. They're going to be in the description. Chris, thank you. Claire, thank you. And to the 40 plus coaches that joined us live today and the hundreds more that'll be watching recorded, thank you for investing in yourself and therefore investing in your team. See you next time.